All right, we're now going to do an example to show how do we get to figure 3. How do we know what the price the buyer pays? How do we know the price the seller receives? How do we know the optimal quantity? So we're going to start here with our competitive market. We're in equilibrium where we have P star Q star, quantity demand equals quantity supplied. And now we're going to introduce a tax. Okay, and we're going to show what happens when we introduce a tax on the producers. So what the tax does is for a given quantity, it requires the producers to have a higher cost. So because of that, at this quantity, let's say here, the producer now not just has that cost, but they have an additional cost of the tax. So if we look at this here, that's the original quantity, and now we're going to cause a tax to be placed upon them, so it shifts that point to there. And this shift is the size of the tax. And in fact, that every quantity is going to have that shift. So when you tax suppliers or producers, it's going to cause the supply curve to shift up. And it's going to shift up in a parallel shift size of the tax. So at this point from here to here, that's also the exact size of the tax. Okay, so step 1 is we understand which curve shifts. In this case, it's a tax on the suppliers, so supply curve will shift up. And now we have a new supply curve, and we're going to identify the point where the new supply curve crosses the old demand curve. And we're going to draw a line down. This is the new equilibrium quantity for taxes. It's where the new supply curve intersects the original demand curve. Well, given that, now we have the 2 points that we're going to analyze. This first point where the new supply curve touches the old demand curve, draw a point over here. This is the price that the buyer pays. Given that quantity, we look at the original supply equation, and this price here is the price that the seller receives. And so now we can identify those different areas. This area here is our new consumer surplus, the demand curve down to the price the buyer is willing to pay, but does not exceed the quantity of our taxes. This area down here this is our producer surplus. Label this consumer surplus. And now we have another area to look at. We have this area here, which is the size of the tax times the quantity. That area there, my pen's running out of ink. Maybe visible enough, that's the tax revenue. And the last area is right here, and this is our deadweight loss. So the steps again is first identify who the tax is upon. In this case, it was about the producer. So we shift the supply curve up. We identify where the new supply curve touches the original demand curve. That's our quantity, our new equilibrium quantity, or the quantity with taxes. Where that point crosses our original demand curve, that's the price the buyer pays. Drawing that line down where it touches the original supply curve, that's the price the seller receives. The difference between those prices is being the size of the tax. The size of the tax times the quantity of goods sold. This rectangle here is our tax revenue. And the amount that we lost from original competitive market, this triangle here, is our deadweight loss.